Thank you. Hello everybody. I'm very happy to join you virtually, and I would like to thank Christoph again for organizing this wonderful event. And I feel sorry that I haven't managed to fly to Cyprus mainly because travel restriction is still active in Hong Kong. And so, what I'm going to present is experimental in nature. I try to extend my theoretical interest, especially on the problem of motivation in the context of Husserl's phenomenology, to the convergence between phenomenology and mindfulness. So I'm going to read my article, my written text. The growing interest among philosophers in the relation between phenomenology and mindfulness is mainly driven by the question, how far do the two practices resemble each other? On the one hand, someone argues for their affinities in method or goal, and thereby suggests that training in mindfulness is advisable or even compulsory to the accomplishment of phenomenology. On the other hand, someone else insists on the fundamental difference between the two, despite accepting the possibility of their cross-fertilisation. While I do not attempt to offer a straightforward solution to this debate, I aim at clarifying the proper theoretical framework for evaluating the significance of mindfulness to phenomenology, namely the motivation for performing epoché and reduction, or what Husserl and his disciples alternatively call the beginning of philosophy. The problem of motivation is crucial to phenomenology in both a practical and a theoretical respect. Practically speaking, it is questionable how epoché and reduction can be carried out, provided the psychological difficulties in abstaining from habitual belief and sustaining the state of pure contemplation. Theoretically speaking, inquiry of the motivation for performing epoché and reduction is a necessary step to bring the scientific task of self-reflection, self-besinnung, to an end, given that phenomenology, as a transcendental project, is obliged to clarify its own conditions of possibility. In other words, the problem of motivation is paramount to both the psychological and the transcendental aspects of phenomenological methodology. Thanks to the pioneering studies by the field phenomenologists interested in mindfulness, the practical significance of mindfulness to phenomenology has become more visible now. Accordingly, phenomenologists are encouraged to learn from the Eastern traditions of meditation, how to cultivate corporeal as well as mental conditions favorable to phenomenological meditation. The current article aspires to supplement what has already been done, strictly from a theoretical point of view, by explaining why the concrete instructions and descriptions of mindful meditation can have a more intimate bearing on the transcendental project as such. Thereby, I do not pretend to take a neutral stance regarding the comparability between phenomenology and mindfulness. I am more sympathetic to the promoters of their isomorphism, hence my interest in delineating a transcendental framework which can incorporate the utility of mindfulness. Yet, as I'm about to show, my argument does not inherently rely on their affinities in method or in goal. This work is divided into three parts. First, the first part summarizes a few established views on the convergence between phenomenology and mindfulness. I focus on the debate over the utility of mindful training to phenomenological philosophy. The second part explains why mindful training is not only practically, but also theoretically relevant to phenomenological philosophy. Thereby, I stress that the practicality of phenomenology is itself a core theoretical issue. The third part introduced the transcendental theory of motivation. I argue that the Husserlian methodology of epoché and reduction still has the problem of motivation to study in order to achieve its theoretical end. Broadly speaking, there are two streams of studies juxtaposing phenomenology and mindfulness. The first stream applies phenomenological concepts to the elucidation of mindful experience. The second stream explores the utility of mindful training to the exercise of phenomenological investigation in general. For sure, these two streams often mingle with each other, hence the prospects of cross-fertilisation. For the current purpose, I focus on the second stream as a guiding thread for thematizing the problem of motivation. Authors who debate the comparability between the practice of phenomenology and the practice of mindfulness are of particular relevance here. Probably the embodied mind, the book co-authors by Varela, Roche, and Thompson, blazed the trail of comparing phenomenology to mindfulness, although phenomenology only plays a transitional role in its whole project. Its whole project is animated by the gulf between science of mind and lived experience, or the disconnect between first person and third person knowledge of oneself. Unsatisfactory consequences follow. Either we accept what science tells us and deny our lived experience, or we hold fast to our lived experience and ignore science. As diagnosed by the authors, the swift is symptomatic of the scientific culture of the West, where people are caught up in a constant oscillation between those two tendencies. In order to fill the gap up, the author suppose it is necessary to enlarge the domain of cognitive science to include our direct experience. Therefore, a discipline's perspective on human experience is needed. Phenomenological philosophy and Buddhist mindfulness are two candidates suggest for taking on this role. However, at least in the first edition of the Embodied Mind, phenomenology was portrayed as a failed or broken down project, since it got boxed down in abstract reflection typical of the Western scientific culture. The specified Husserl's own turn toward experience is still entirely theoretical and thus devoid of practical dimension. In contrast, the mindful approach to experience is open-ended and transformative. It cultivates the practitioner's ability of self-awareness and fosters experimentation of new possibilities. Thereby, the Buddhist tradition of mindfulness is welcomed as a remedy to the West, helping to create an open space for the circulation between cognitive science and human experience. Thereafter, there are two important contributors to the circulation, the past and people, who engage with mindfulness more for the sake of phenomenology. But the embodied mind quickly dismissed phenomenology as abstract theory. The past and people, to a large extent, entrust phenomenology, primarily Husserlian, with the task of exploring a vast variety of lived experience, albeit the sober awareness of its practical drawbacks. Mindfulness is then appreciated as a practical discipline for improving the performance of phenomenology. In the co-author's book on becoming aware, the past takes on the twofold philosophical challenge of introducing phenomenology as a solid method for describing lived experience, exposing the limitations of phenomenology as it was historically presented. In short, given that the success of phenomenological reduction presupposes a radical change from a habitual ethos to an anti-natural ethos, Husserl's reflections on the conversion are astonishingly theoretical and general. It seems to lack interest in working out the corporeal and spiritual techniques required for carrying out the reduction. To rectify this deficiency, the plan suggests bring phenomenology and the Oriental traditions of mindfulness into communication. Accordingly, a truly phenomenological experience has to be trained and cultivated. But Husserl only hints at the structural characteristics of different ways of reduction. Buddhist meditation furnishes us with congruous predisposition to their execution. Hence, the methodological foundation missing in Husserlian phenomenology. The author goes on to compare the classical ways of reduction to the dependent jhanas, a theme further elaborates in an article, while demonstrating how phenomenology and mindfulness can converge. The limits of their homology are well kept in sight. Accordingly, the main difference resides in goal as well as level of experience and description. The aim of Husserlian phenomenology is essentially gnoseological, whereas Buddhist meditation gives primacy to a soteriological end. Besides, a phenomenologist studies the identity structures of lived experience, whereas a Buddhist meditator attends to a singular lived experience which come and go. People share similar opinions regarding the difference between phenomenology and mindfulness. In the article, Consciousness Being and Life, people contrast them as an epistemic and a therapeutic project, respectively. But the central motivation of phenomenology is obviously knowledge. The Buddhist path of mindfulness aims at uprooting the existential cause of suffering. Thereby, a practitioner of mindfulness pays exquisite attention to the moment-to-moment unfolding of experience, instead of trying to grasp any invariable feature of it. In terms of method, it seems that people also agree on the deficiency in phenomenology. While Buddhist teachings are very rich in methodological prescriptions about how to meditate, so he remarks, the phenomenological literature is very discreet about methodological issues. Thus said, he believes that phenomenology is a renewed strategy of ascesis and consists of a radically participatory stance that bears existential similarities with mindfulness. It is because, according to Husserl, the radical quest for knowledge implies an outright transformation of life comparable to a religious conversion. Phenomenology can then take advantage of mindful training as a variant of its own methodological precondition. Despite the rough demarcation of goals and means, both authors anticipate practical rewards from the convergence of phenomenology and mindfulness, based on the observation that the two approaches to lived experience do share some common grounds in terms of motivation as well as methodology. However, let's face the recent challenge from Stone and Zahavi. In the article, Phenomenology and Mindfulness, the two critics claim that the difference touched upon are far more substantial than the two authors are prepared to acknowledge. Although Stone and Zahavi still admit the possibility of cross-fertilisation, to a large extent, they are not convinced by the outline strategy to place mindful practice at the core of phenomenological practice, but their commonalities are much thinner than expected. As a result, being a skilled practitioner of mindfulness is neither necessary nor sufficient for being a good phenomenological philosopher. They further argue that Buddhist philosophy is a more legitimate source of inspiration for phenomenology. So far, I've summarized the mainstream debate over the value of mindful training to phenomenological investigation. Mindfulness is either more suitable than phenomenology to unravel our lived experience, or it can become the best complement to phenomenology, or it can barely fit in the phenomenological project at all. No matter which side one takes, the focus is on the missing link between the natural attitude and the phenomenological attitude. Mindfulness is considered a potential partner of phenomenology only because the exact operation of epoché and reduction remains enigmatic. We know what Husserl and his followers want to achieve, but we are unsure how to reach there. A natural way to tackle this missing link is by equipping the philosopher with practical guidelines. Thereby, the classical distinction between theory and practice becomes formless here. For those interested in promoting mindfulness within the phenomenological domain, Husserl's scientific ideal remains an empty promise so long as it lacks the proper means to realize itself. Notwithstanding the theoretical strength of phenomenology, the additional quest for practical rigor animates the grand tour of the East. Hopefully, the Oriental schools of meditation will help to bring an abstract theory down to a concrete reality. But it is quite common for any theory to miss the problem of practicality. The distinction involved here is an unordinary one. The missing link between the natural and the phenomenological does not concern the application of a theory, but the initiation of it. In Husserl's own words, it concerns the very beginning of philosophy. The practicality it demands here matters before rather than after theory. But what makes the initiation of phenomenology such a complicated issue? Why is phenomenological theory preceded by practice of an unordinary kind? True, phenomenology is first and foremost a theoretical discipline, at least with Husserl's intention. Phenomenology is modeled after the ancient's ideal of first philosophy. It sets itself the ambitious goal of laying an absolute foundation for all science. Being a foundational science of all science, phenomenology calls for a radical suspension of orwellian beliefs. The beginning philosopher leaves behind every mundane interest and thereby opens up a transcendental field of research. To ensure the purity of transcendental research, Husserl introduced the method of epoché and reduction. He further specifies different ways of enacting epoché and reduction, among which the Cartesian way, the psychological way, and the ontological way are the cardinals. In fact, access to transcendentality has been a problem, occupying almost the whole intellectual life of Husserl. He's well aware of the unclarities in his presentations and constantly revises his methodological ideas under the guise of new introductions. His insistence on transcendentality even leads to the history of Husserlian heresies. Controversy lies within the robust conversion from mundanity to transcendentality. Critics doubt if it is possible at all to enact epoché and reduction, provided theoretical abstention demands. There can be milder doubt over its practical possibility or stronger doubt over its theoretical possibility. Even though one accepts the scientific ideal projected by Husserl, one can still doubt if the scientific ideal is realizable or not. One can even doubt if a transcendental field of research is in principle conceivable or not. In fact, the practical possibility of epoché and reduction also affects the theoretical possibility of phenomenology in general. For theory, with no share in the reality is likely to be wrong. In other words, an inquiry into the practicality of Husserlian phenomenology is at the same time an inquiry into the reality of the transcendent enterprise as such. For this reason, the problem of practice matters here. If the practice preceding the theory is called into question, then the foundation of the theory is also shaken, especially in the phenomenological context. The core model of the access to lived experience ceases to be a mere practical issue. It touches upon the core of transcendental theory as well. The practical a priori becomes itself a transcendental issue to be worked out theoretically. Thereby, phenomenology systematizes itself to ask for its own conditions of possibility. Following Husserl, we can name this inquiry a phenomenology of phenomenology. In the light of scientific self-reflection, we can see that the promotion of mindful training to phenomenological philosophy shows a sign of optimism, whereby the practical possibility of transcendental research is presupposed. As I'm going to show, strictly from a theoretical perspective, phenomenology is also responsible for recognizing its own lack in methodology to cater for any fruitful cross-fertilisation. And I believe phenomenological study of motivation serves to step out. Clarification of the practical a priori is indeed an intrinsic demand of phenomenology. As a transcendental philosophy which strives for an absolute foundation of science, it is obliged to legitimize itself by laying bare its own conditions of possibility. With the ability to justify itself down to its roots, Husserl remarks, phenomenology then confers to itself the highest dignity of genuineness. Thus said, the dignified project of phenomenology is not yet in its mature form. How one should establish the missing link seems to remain an open question. As I want to emphasize in this article, the debate on the phenomenological relevance of mindfulness is itself a great revelator of the missing link. It seems to indicate that something substantial is lacking at the core of phenomenology. Even Husserl's methodological delineations of epoché and reduction fall short of the mark. Besides inviting the Eastern traditions to say phenomenology, I wonder if phenomenology has from itself any theoretical insights to offer about its own lack. And I believe that the problem of motivation serves as an ideal framework for phenomenology to make sense of its own lack. Husserl's own methodological presentations are revealing and concealing at the same time. By introducing different ways of epoché and reduction, it leaves us the impression that accessing the transcendental field is totally up to our decision and our liberty. So long as we will, we can follow the step-by-step instructions from the master and share the same view of his. We can almost suspect that he hides the stumbling blocks which stand in the way of phenomenology. Meanwhile, the most extensive treatment of the problematic aspects of phenomenology is published we found in Eugen Fink's work, the Sixth Cartesian Meditation. There, he proposed a systematic reflection of Husserl's own, reflection of phenomenology's own roots under the rubric of transcendental theory of method. Then he divides his List meta theory into two parts. The first part concerns the beginning of philosophy, while the second part deals with the beginning philosopher. For the current purpose, we focus on the part about the beginning of philosophy. Talking about the beginning of philosophy, Fink thematized the motivation for conducting phenomenological research as the chief problem. It is because the very condition of possibility of phenomenology as such namely the shift from mundanity to transcendentality, remains an enigma. Even though phenomenology is first and foremost a theory, its effectuation depends on somebody in the world putting it into practice out of certain motivation. Otherwise, the whole transcendental enterprise will lose its share of reality and fall in vain. Given the radicality demanded by Husserl's project, however, it is unclear how the whole train of thought can commence at all. Husserl's own methodical introductions are unfortunately not helpful enough for explaining the commencements of phenomenology, since the conscious application of epoché and reduction already presupposed the effectuation of phenomenological attitudes. So notes by Fink. To break this circularity, we need to search elsewhere. Fink has entertained some answers suggested probably by Husserl or his colleagues, but soon rejects motives either of psychological or of historical origin, but they all presuppose the possibility of motivating phenomenology inside the world. Yet, this is the exact thesis he firmly opposes. He believes that any ascription of phenomenology to a worldly motive compromises the radicality of this transcendental discipline. Accordingly, the distinction between mundane and transcendental will collapse if we only rely on a valid solution to the problem of motivation. But the activity of transcendental speculation must still start from somewhere, hence the paradox underlying phenomenological methodology. Fink himself has offered a very interesting solution to the problem of motivation by reference to extreme passivity. Though what matters here is not what answer he gives, but how he frames the question into a more productive form. As he insists, there is no way to motivate phenomenology inside the world. There's no step-by-step approach from the natural to the transcendental perspective. But this does not imply that phenomenology is unmotivated at all. Anyway, it still depends on somebody living in the world to make it happen. Thereby he distinguishes between motivation into the mundane kind and the transcendental kind. The transcendental theory of method looks for illustration of transcendental motivation. It aims at accounting the paradox underlying the practice of phenomenology. This is the biggest merit I see in Fink's work. It helps to thematize the practice of phenomenology into a theoretical paradox. He pushes us to think beyond the limits by asking how it is possible to realize an impossible ideal. Of course, his questioning, as well as his own answer, deserve more in-depth discussions, but I wish to hold back the details and concentrate on the transcendental significance Fink has conferred to the concept of motivation. So long as we recognize the transcendental function of motivation, there indeed abundant places to look for extra thoughts. In fact, Husserl and his other disciples like Keynes, Patočka, Landgrave, etc., have also addressed the problem of motivation in the context of the beginning of philosophy. In my opinion, this implies a vast area for promising research, and the relevance falls differ from each other in a very inspiring way. Curiously, despite the central importance of the problem of motivation, it seems not to have attracted much interest among phenomenological scholars. I can think of several possible reasons. To a large extent, the problem of motivation remains operative rather than thematic in Husserl's corpus. But he does address this issue. He does not expect a programmatic study like what Fink has sketched. In Husserl's corpus, the concept of motivation can mean multiple things, and it is applicable to different occasions. Its methodological significance is thereby blurred. There's no single coherent conception of motivation to be found in Husserl's corpus. He holds different views in different works in different periods. Sometimes scholars just pick a part of his views and mistake it as his genuine theory. The methodological significance of motivation may be overshadowed by other themes, like the different ways of epoché and reduction, which Husserl obviously has paid more attention to. This is a quick assessment of the underestimated study of transcendental motivation, which details justifications I have to omit here. In general, I believe this study has the potential of a new point of departure for evaluating the different ways of epoché and reduction. Furthermore, it can also become an ideal framework for joining mindful practice to phenomenological practice. If we accept that phenomenology is obliged to clarify its own methodological grounds, and if we also accept that the Husserlian method of epoché reduction is still haunted by a lack of practicality, then the transcendental theory of motivation, as a part of the transcendental theory of method, unfolds a scientific self-reflection of this lack. Thereby, phenomenology can make good sense of the extension of its methodological interest to other practical disciplines. There are indeed many possibilities to pursue this line of research. Broadly speaking, taking the guiding fruits of Husserl's systematics of constitutive levels, the emergence of phenomenology can be studied in light of aesthetic, genetic, and generative motivations, and there remains an exegetical problem of reconciling Husserl's descriptions at different levels. Perhaps it is even more productive to treat the study of motivation as an open space. For example, as Hans Heine said, has put it nicely, phenomenology is essentially open to a plurality of motivation, and therefore it is only possible as radical democracy. So come to a conclusion. It remains controversial how far mindfulness can complement phenomenology. And the controversy centers around the degree to which they resemble each other. In this article, I do not attempt a straightforward argument for the affinity. I try only to show how phenomenology can make good sense of its potential convergence with mindfulness, strictly from a theoretical point of view. If phenomenology is in need of more practical guidelines to save its effectiveness, then at the same time, it is theoretically responsible for disclosing this need to itself. I suggest that the transcendental theory of motivation opens up the horizon, allowing theory and practice to meet. Perhaps Fink is also the prophet who has foreseen the cross-fertilisation between phenomenology and mindfulness. In the late manuscript of 1934, as pointed by Butina, Fink calls for a structural comparison between phenomenology and Buddhism for systematics of self-completing spirits, Sixth Cartesian Meditation. The classical distinction between theory and practice tends to get blurred at the margin of phenomenological investigation. When we examine the emergence of the whole discipline, theory becomes practice and practical issue becomes theoretical issue. Although we can safely admit the divergence of goals and means between phenomenology and mindfulness, since they both target the cultivation of self-awareness in a broad sense, I believe that dialogue will continue to thrive. So thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you both for the great presentations. Are there any questions here or on Zoom? Evie, could you maybe come closer to the microphone? Sorry, because yesterday was a bit difficult for people to hear.
Hello, hi. So am I talking to the second speaker? Yeah. Hello, hi. So thank you very much for a fantastic paper. I think you're very right to say that phenomenology often lacks the practical guidelines, right? And so I really like your argument. However, I'm not sure if mindfulness can fill up this gap, because the way I understand it is that I'm not sure we practice mindfulness for the same reason we do philosophy or phenomenology, if you like. So maybe would you like to talk a little bit about the motivation behind doing mindfulness, and whether and why you see that this motivation is the same as doing philosophy? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, this is a tricky, it's a very important question. But also to me, I have a tricky response because I take advantage of the scholarly work done by someone else. As mentioned, I summarize a bit the debates already established, work by other scholars, like before the past, even Thompson, etc. So personally, I have no straightforward argument for why mindfulness is necessary to phenomenology, because I believe it is still an open question. It is still an open question, and personally, I have no fixed answer to this yet. What I try to do is to try to argue that phenomenology should be aware of the lack inside its methodology, which enable the emergence of such a debate. And talking about, since my focus is on motivation, I would like maybe I can share more ideas I currently have, because so far I know that motivation can designate a vast variety of things. According to Husserl, according to Fink, or other of his disciples, say it can mean some historical ideas or philosophy, like the Cartesian idea, or like the Kantian idea of transcendental philosophy. Or it can mean skepticism. It can mean cultural shock. It can mean what Fink, especially famous for saying extreme situations and some limits experience, like religious experience, etc. It can mean really a variety of things, which means that, which probably means that there are many possible ways to motivate the beginning of philosophy. And so far, I would like, what I want to do is to open up this space of research rather than give a fixed answer to it. And I believe that mindfulness can join this family. And so we first need a theoretical framework for delineating this field of research. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Francesca has a question. Yes, please.
Hi. First of all, Ming, your talk was fantastic. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question for Anya. Thank you, Anya, for your talk. I really enjoyed it. Some year that I work in the field of mental health, and I'm extremely concerned in the way we can change the narrative in clinical practices. Using another, put it differently. What I noticed working with clinicians, mental health professionals, social workers, is that all the things you were proposing through your talk today basically are not on the table. In medical schools, and it's extremely evident in a training, in medical training, there is the narrative aimed to build the so-called medical self, in which the attention for the patient, for the person, and not only for the diagnosis, is completely absent. So my question is, according to you, how can we change this narrative? What we can do to change this perspective on how clinicians can deal with the person, with the burden of their pain, and not only with the diagnosis, with the illness. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Francesca. Really interesting question. And I think I would have to say that I think things are shifting already, but they're in different little pockets. So I'm sure you're aware of the work of Thomas Fuchs, who's in Heidelberg, and he's in the Karl Jaspers Chair of Psychiatry. So he does work within phenomenology, and he uses this more alternative approach, of focusing on embodiment and space and empathy and all of those things. And he has some wonderful projects that have come out of his centre there. And also Matthew Broome in the UK. He's trained at the Maudsley Institute, which is a phenomenological psychiatric hospital and research institution. So I think there are some changes happening, but you are completely correct that it's not sufficiently taken hold, and we still have a very reductive view. And even though, according to a lot of the literature, they're supposed to be presenting the biopsychosocial model of diagnosis and treatment, as many have noted, it's really just the bio model, and it's become hugely neurocentric with with the focus on the brain, as if the brain is the whole thing, and as if the self can be found in the brain, which we know from various wonderful papers, including one brilliant one by Sean Gallagher, and who was the other person he wrote with? I can't remember, maybe Shmogi Varga, I'm not sure, but about trying to find, oh, I know who it was his name will come to me in about an hour. He's a psychiatrist in Europe. Anyway, they've written a paper together about, saying that the self is nowhere in the brain. They looked at all the data, the findings, and it cannot be identified as being in any particular location within the brain, nor within the whole of the brain. And, of course, we've got the inactivist view that sort of extends the self out into the world, and including other people as well. So the very intersubjective sense of self. So I think there are some changes happening, but the more we have, the better. So please do go out there and, sort of add your bit to the goal of transforming psychiatry. Yeah, I think it needs changing. I'm not sure if you're aware of Thomas Insel. He was the director of the National Mental Institute of Health in the United States for many years. And there's this notorious quote, which I've used a couple of times now, where he confesses, he says, we've spent so much money on neuroscience and we haven't moved the dial at all on mental health issues. So I think that's an incredible indictment of the failings of psychiatric practice and also neuroscience as it is applied to mental health. Anyway, thank you, Francesca. Nice to meet you.
Next, we have Hayden Key, who is here, and then a question by Pierrick Simon, who is he wrote his question on chat.
Hi, thanks to both presenters for the talks. This is actually a question for Hon, but interestingly, it kind of ties into this point we were just discussing. So Hon, nice to see you. Nice to see some familiar scenes from CU there. And thanks so much for your talk. It really sharpened some of the questions about the motivations for phenomenology that I've had in my mind. And I'm not as familiar with the Fink stuff, so that was really helpful for me, especially since Merleau-Ponty takes up Fink in his own thinking about how we get into phenomenology. And I think that's very important for Merleau-Ponty's thinking about it. Now, you said you kind of wanted to just broaden the scope of the questions for the motivations about phenomenology. And then the question of, why mindfulness specifically was addressed at you. So kind of in that broader context, I wanted to ask, do you have any thoughts about what I interpret to be Merleau-Ponty's solution to this problem, or at least one possible solution, which is that, at least as I read him in certain texts, especially the structure of behavior, I think his position is that the kind of inherent inadequacy of a purely naturalistic, objectivist approach to the mind or to behavior is what ultimately motivates phenomenology. So it arises out of the inadequacy of a kind of purely objectivist science, that science comes to realize on its own terms that it needs to become phenomenological. And I take him to give that account in a couple of places. It's a little bit of a just so story, but it's at least one kind of answer to how we might have another source of motivation for phenomenology. But maybe from Fink and Husserl's perspective, that's not adequately transcendental or something along those lines. It might be too worldly of a motivation for phenomenology. So that's either just a comment for further thought, or if you have some thoughts about that and would like to respond, I'd be very curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, very nice to see you, Hayden. I'm jealous of you that you can fly there. And yeah, I have learned a lot from this workshop, and I believe I'll continue to learn more, especially from your presentation, because I'm not that familiar with how other phenomenologies, especially I think it's related to the next question, those more existentialist oriented philosophers like Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, how they can adjust to the same issue. Yeah, especially regarding the beginner philosophy. Yeah, so far, if I understand you correctly, maybe Merleau-Ponty want to suggest that the overcoming of naturalism and objectivism provides one of the motive to for the emergence of phenomenology. If it's how I understand. Yeah, I think it's very famous that Merleau-Ponty stressed on the facticity or the human condition of phenomenology. Hence, he mentions that transcendental reduction cannot be completed. I think this is another perspective to incorporate the significance of mindful practice to phenomenology. What I present mostly rely on the Husserlian and Finkian line of debate. Why I find it important is that it seems to me Fink, the merits of Fink's thought is that he thematized the paradox, the methodological problems in a very unsettling way. Hence, the incompatibility between facticity and transcendentality, or what he also calls the absoluteness. And from the text I mainly refers to on the convergence, say on the past and people's analysis, they stress on the phenomenological relevance of mindfulness, mainly out of the Husserlian, out of the concept of Husserlian phenomenology. It's precisely because, like what Husserl and Fink stress, phenomenology requires a radical suspension of the world thesis and enter the transcendental domain. Hence, its purity and its epistemological rigor, but at the same time, it brings practical problem to itself. That's why the authors I mentioned stress that they need the supplement or the complement of practical disciplines. And mindfulness is obviously a very good candidate. Maybe not the only one, but so far it's a very good candidate. But I provided that other phenomenologists like Heidegger or Merleau-Ponty, they have no such high demand, I would say, on phenomenological method. Maybe they won't face similar theoretical problem. This is just a wild guess. So, yeah, I thanks for your question. I would like to learn more how they can encounter how they would conceive the relation between phenomenology and other practical disciplines. So far, I have no fixed answers on that.
Yeah, great. We'll talk more about it maybe later in the summer and maybe read some Fink together.
Yeah, sure. I'm very happy to.
Yeah, just because I didn't make the connection clear. I mean, the connection with Anya's talk and what she was just saying is maybe just that where I think Merleau-Ponty kind of diagnosed the inadequacy of a purely objectivist psychology or science of behavior in his time. Maybe the contemporary research would do the same for neuroscience, and that can be one of the motivations for phenomenologizing that discussion a bit. But okay, thanks to both.
Thank you.
Now we have a question going to Pierre's question. You didn't answer that, right? Sorry, I was outside of the room. Okay. So the question is, thank you both for these great talks. For Ming Hon Chu, do you think more existentialist phenomenologies, which have less foundationalist assumptions face the same problem in the same way of justifying its beginning? It was answered. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I was outside of the room for 2 minutes and I missed it. All right, so any other questions? No? Okay, then let's thank the speakers. Thank you very much. And,
Thanks a lot again.
we'll take a 2-minute break and we'll resume with Joseph Cohen and Hayden Key.